let's take a break from the hoops talk, Tim, to talk some lacrosse. And man, this team's playing well. Last 4 games after they had that, those back-to-back losses, the head scratcher to Harvard. They've certainly picked up their play. I mean, what stood out to you from this latest win over Colgate?
Yeah, it's hard to not start with Joey Spallina based on what he did. 11 points for Spallina, which was the most in a game since Casey Powell scored 13 against Virginia in 1997. So Joey has now had 3 double-figure scoring games in his career. He hit 10 points 2 times and had 11 the other day against Colgate. So, his production is just really up there with some of the greats all time at Syracuse. And I know that some fans like to say, well, let's see him do it against Hopkins or against a top 5 team and things like that. Colgate definitely more of an offensive-minded team, but they were a ranked team. And Syracuse plays one of the toughest schedules in the country year in and year out, and he's right up there in points every single year. And he joined the 200-point club. He was tied for the second fastest player in program history to get to 200 points. So, yes, it's a little bit of a different era in lacrosse than maybe going back to the 80s and the 90s, and there's more goals. And just look at the way Colgate is playing. I mean, they came in averaging 16 goals per game, and Syracuse held them to 2 goals in the entire first half. And then they did kind of get more possessions in the second half and got a couple past Jimmy McCool, who was very, very good in the first half, probably the best half he's played this year. He had 13 saves in the first half alone and 18 in the game. So all in all, very satisfied, I think, if you're a Syracuse fan, with how the last couple games have gone here. There's still little things that, all the fans are looking for that perfect 60-minute game still. They show some lapses. And yes, they should beat a Colgate or they should beat a Utah, and some of the schedule is lined up pretty well for them here, and we're going to really find out in the next 2, 3, 4 weeks once ACC play starts this weekend and onward. But I think they are coming together and playing like one of the better teams in the country.
Jumped out to an 8-2 lead at halftime, and Joey Spallina was really a setup man in the first half, had assists on 3 straight goals, and then it almost seemed like when Colgate got close that he was just like, fine, I'm going to do it myself, and kind of took matters into his own hands. And he's got that second gear, right? Like he can sit behind the net and just pick you apart all day, but he can also score, obviously.
Yeah, it was funny to hear Gary's comments post-game because they asked him about Colgate's defensive strategy, which Colgate is known for maybe calling it like junking it up a little bit, trying to throw out some zone. They throw out a 10-man ride, which the Orange had a good game plan against that. And for those that don't follow lacrosse that closely, 10-man ride means you're using the goalie, you're emptying the net and taking the goalie out during what the ride is, which is preventing the other team from clearing. So kind of like a full court press a little bit in basketball. And Syracuse scored a couple goals from beyond half field, or 1 goal from beyond half field from Billy Juan. Joey scored on an empty net as well against the 10-man ride. And they looked a little bit more poised against that than other teams that face Colgate. That's how they get a lot of their possessions back, is forcing turnovers. Syracuse is pretty good in that regard. And their defensive strategy, sometimes Kyle and I are calling the games and we're like, why do teams do this against Joey, where they let him just have the defender hung up and just sit back there and he can find a guy? He's the best passer probably in the nation in terms of finding guys on the move and putting it exactly where you want it. And sometimes teams want to slow down Syracuse's quick ball movement by just letting Joey be camped behind the net. And I get it a little bit, but anytime someone has done that, he's gone off for like 6, 7 assists. So I feel like if you look at how he's done against that strategy, it doesn't really make sense why they're doing that.
So Joey Spallina, big day, 11 points, career high for him. Owen Hiltz also went over 200 career points, and he's a guy that didn't come in the same class as Joey, but came in with high expectations, and he's had some injuries throughout his career, but he's really developed into a really good player.
Yeah, I feel like Owen Hiltz is playing by far the best lacrosse of his career. Gary mentioned in the preseason that he lost some weight and came back with kind of the right attitude and everything. And he honestly doesn't maybe get enough credit because Joey does get a lot of the big scoring games, and we've talked a lot about how good John Mullen has been at the Faceoff X. I think Owen Hiltz is that cerebral leader for the team where he just has such a high lacrosse IQ. He knows when to slow things down. If it's a potential fast break, he's going to make the right call if they get him the ball. And he's just been around. He's played in a lot of big lacrosse games. I think he kind of has like a nonchalant nature about him, so teams kind of don't talk about him as much, or that maybe the media don't talk about him as much. Like when Joey scores, he's pumping his fist, he's going crazy. Owen Hiltz is like, yeah, just another goal. Let me snipe it in the corner. No ho-hum about it. But he's a terrific shooter, really high lacrosse IQ, and he has taken his game, even in what is his last year of eligibility, he's taking his game to another level this year for sure.
I did speak with Gary Gate before the radio show today because we're going to have him on our TV show tonight. I know, Tim, you're going to be on it as well. So shameless plug there, 7 to 7:30 tonight. We'll have an interview with Gary Gate. Tim Leonard will be on at the end of the show live to talk some more lacrosse with us. Anyway, I asked Gary about the back-to-back losses. I said, listen, I know no coach wants to lose games. You always want to teach after a win if possible. But the fact that you lost those games back-to-back, has that helped you? And are you a better team because of it? And he said absolutely, and it's hard to argue with that. It does look like they learned something from those back-to-back losses.
Yeah, and I think that's why they schedule so tough and why his strategy every year is to play not just against the best teams, but play a lot of games against the best teams. You look across the country, Notre Dame didn't play last week. They'll play probably, I think it's 10 or 11 games in their regular season schedule. They'll play basically the minimum. Syracuse, and I've talked with Gary about this a lot, he said, when I was a player, I got tired of doing practice all the time. I wanted to play games. That's where you get better. And that's what all the guys that are lacrosse rats and want to be a part of this team, because they know that Gary Gate is kind of in line with them, and they come here and they know they're going to play big games and they're going to play a lot of huge games against top 10 teams. So I think they have gotten better from those losses. The other thing is, that Harvard game, we said it afterwards that it was just kind of like a statistical anomaly based on how many faceoffs they won. That is the only game where Jimmy McCool has not been at least very good. You know, he's been really good in some of these games. And Gary did mention that was Jimmy McCool, a guy from Boston going against Harvard. A lot of his buddies from high school, and maybe it got in his head a little bit, which is understandable. And you can kind of overlook some of that sometimes. But I do think Jimmy McCool has been even better than you would have hoped, and in his first year starting, he's been one of the best goalies in the country at this point.
And now next up is Virginia. It's a road game, Klockner Stadium, tough place to play. This is an opponent that is playing with some urgency, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they've got 4 losses already, all to top 20 teams. We should point out that, Virginia's 5-4, but they've lost to good opponents. And it's an ACC game, and it's an important one because, like we saw with men's basketball, you got to play your way into the ACC tournament. Speak to, I guess, how important this one is to get off on the right foot in conference play against a team that's playing desperate, playing at home. This isn't going to be an easy game.
Yeah, no, this is going to be a close game. I would be very surprised if it's not. And I know Virginia's record isn't that good. They're 5-4 now, coming off a win over Utah. And they don't really have any great wins to this point in the season. But this is something Kyle and I talk about a lot. In lacrosse especially, how much the opponent matters a lot. And you just go look at what happened when conference play opens across the nation in Division I lacrosse last week, outside of the ACC really. Maryland lost to Michigan. Michigan's a team that just seemingly always beats Maryland for some reason. And even though Maryland was 7-goal favorites in that game, Michigan beat them in triple overtime. Rutgers beat Johns Hopkins, which was a big upset. Army lost for the first time as well to Boston University in conference. So conference play is a different beast. All these games are going to be close. And I know on paper, Virginia seemingly has a down year, but they're going to pick off at least one ACC win, I'd say, and it could very well be Syracuse. It's a tough place to go down there and win a game.
You mentioned all the upsets that we've seen in college lacrosse. The new media poll is out, and there is a new number 1 team, and it's a team from Central New York, Cornell, sitting at the top. I don't know how much you've seen of the Big Reds. Syracuse will see them here in a couple of weeks. I know they've got 2 games prior to that to get ready. But what have you seen? C.J. Kirst, right? It starts with him. I mean, what have you seen out of the Big Red? Yeah,
that's going to be a really fun game. On Long Island, neutral site, 2 teams that score a lot. We know what happened last year. If anyone needs a refresher, it was that wild game where Cornell came back after Pat March was ejected. They won in overtime on a C.J. Kirst game winner, and he is definitely the favorite right now to win the Heisman of College Lacrosse, the Tewaaraton Award. So, yeah, it's an interesting year, really, because Cornell, to me, you watch them, and in all these teams, it just doesn't feel like there's an elite team this year. And I think some of that is so many of the previous years we've had that clear-cut elite team, and it's because a lot of guys were on their 5th year of college lacrosse, a lot of veteran teams. Notre Dame for the last 2 years has won. They've been head and shoulders above everyone else. Maryland before that was a historically great team. So you look at Syracuse, and I think a lot of fans are like, they're still having these lapses, and they're not playing consistently enough to be a Final Four team. But I think the threshold to make the Final Four this year, we need to reset from what it was the last couple years when there were the COVID years and veteran guys.
Fun fact about that game last year, the referee that threw out Pat March, he was an assistant basketball coach at Ithaca when I was there. He was one of my assistant coaches when I was there.
That's a fun fact.
Yeah. He also maybe had a Cornell email or something. There was some digging.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's lived there forever, and I believe his wife works at Cornell. There's a Cornell tie.
Yeah.
But yes, he's been there for a really long time. Anyway, yes, strange game. They got some making up to do. Do you want to chime in, Paulie?
No, I can't believe the fun that fact was.
I enjoyed it, Steve. I thought it was pretty fun.
Thank you, Tim. He's sitting here doing other things. He's not even paying attention.
Right.
And then I say something, he's got to chime in.
I am the purveyor of fun on this show.
That was not fun.
And I heard fun, so I was like, all right, let's go. This is going to be fun. Nah, nope.
No, it wasn't fun. All right.
Fun fail.
Well, with that, I guess we'll end this interview. Tim, thanks so much for coming on. We'll see you tonight on the TV side of things.
Always fun to be on,
Thank
Steve.
you.
Yes,
Thank you. I think you're fun as well. Paulie, not so much. We're back after this on ESPN Radio.